actually a picture of him because I'm not allowed to do that, but this is what you can all envision him looking like. So Dillon's problem behavior was that he doesn't stay seated properly in his chair. That means specifically that his bum is not on the surface during class time, whether he's in a chair or sitting on the floor. And the reason why I had concluded that in the definition is because in their classroom they sit both on the carpet sometimes and in their chairs, and Dillon has trouble in both settings. When I did the teacher form to ask his teacher what sort of behaviors he engages in, she said that most of the time the reason why he's engaging in that behavior is because of these 4 reasons. Sensory came up with a mean score of 4, escape with a mean score of 3.75, attention with the same score, and tangible with a score of 2.75. However, although some of those scores were the same, the escape and the attention score, I decided that attention was the function based on the observations that I had with Dillon. And the reason why is because of the next slide. As you can see, here's the structured ABC recording form results. And this graph that I have is the percentage of occurrences that occurred either the antecedent before Dillon's problem behavior, or in the orange, the consequence of Dillon's problem behavior. 30% of the time he was receiving pure attention before he engaged in the problem behavior, which is not sitting in his seat. 40% of the time before the problem behavior occurred, the teacher asked him or the class a question or to complete a task. Then, as you can see, 50% of the time after the behavior occurred, after he got out of his seat, the consequence was attention. He either received attention from the teacher by telling him, "Dillon, sit back in your chair," or from his peers. And then 40% of the time it was for really no good reason. He received really nothing after this happened. He was either ignored or no one even noticed what happened, generally because they're so used to it. So that's why I chose attention as the function of the behavior, which I define in the next slide. My hypothesis statement was, when Dillon is presented with a task to complete during class time, he leaves his seat in order to obtain pure attention. So he did receive attention from the teacher, but generally it was more important to him that he receive attention from his peers. Then, as you can see here, is the competing behavior pathway. So I defined clearly what Dillon does now, what he should be doing, and what we can do instead to help him to still gain the same function, which is pure attention, but through different behaviors that are more appropriate. So as you can see, the setting here was class assignment. The antecedent to the problem behavior is that he receives a task. The desired behavior is, of course, like we want every student to do, work on his task while seated. And the consequence of that would be he completes his assignment and receives praise. However, his problem behavior is that he does not stay seated properly, and as a consequence, he receives pure attention, showing again that the function of the behavior is attention. The alternative behavior that we would like for to happen is that when he is properly seated, that's the behavior, the teacher will praise him to his peers. So he's still receiving the function of pure attention while engaging in a more appropriate behavior. The objective that we have concluded with this alternative behavior is as follows. When presented with 5 8-minute tasks to complete each day during class time, Dillon will remain seated properly in his chair or on the floor for the duration of 4 out of those 5 tasks, and we want him to accomplish this by January 15th. We left a larger open window of time because right now he's doing 0 of those 8-minute tasks in his seat, and we want to make sure that he has enough time to decrease that problem behavior to a total of 8 minutes. And so, of course, if we begin the intervention and he's responding more quickly, then we can push forward the day instead of leaving it to January 15th. His behavioral support plan involves 3 steps. The first is that we will show Dillon the video how to stay seated properly, which I filmed with a model and will show in the next slide. The second step, once he understands what staying seated properly means, is that we will present him with an 8-minute assignment, which is from the behavioral objective that I showed in the last slide. And he'll remain seated for 2 minutes, When he does this, the teacher will direct the attention of his peers to him. As this process is successful, the teacher will increase the time that Dillon must remain seated and gradually fade that public praise. So by the end of the intervention, Dillon should be able to stay seated for 2 minutes and longer. He will be seated for 8 minutes, and he will no longer need public praise to encourage him to do that. We will not watch this whole video, but this is the beginning.
Your teacher asks you to stay seated properly in your chair or on the floor during class so that you can stay safe. And so that you can pay close attention to what he or she, how you should sit in a chair. Your feet are on the ground. Your bum is touching the chair.
The next portion was inter-observer agreement. I brought a friend with me who is also trained to the extent that I am, and we determined with 100% agreement that Dillon was engaging in the problem behavior the same amount of times within that 15-minute observation. And then as you can see, here's the graph that shows the baseline behavior, and once the intervention was implemented, the behavior decreased to 0 over the 10 weeks. So I'm happy to report that it was successful.